Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. She wanted my land, I wanted peace. What started as cupcakes and fake smiles ended with felony charges, hidden cameras, and a $1.6 million lawsuit against me. But she made one mistake. She thought I'd roll over. She didn't know I record everything. I never wanted neighbors. That wasn't some passing thought. I really never wanted neighbors. That's why, when I left my 20-year security job and bought those 8 acres of forest and riverside land in North Carolina, I did it with one goal: peace, privacy. No damn HOA. I wasn't looking for a community. I was looking for the exact opposite. I planted trees, built a modest timber frame house by hand, and spent my days tending to my chickens, mushrooms, and beehives. I set trail cameras up near the creek, not for security, but to watch foxes and raccoons go about their lives. My closest friends lived in town, a solid 15-minute drive away. That's the way I liked it. Unfortunately, the HOA liked my land too. The River Birch Hollow development showed up 3 years ago like a cancer on the landscape. Big stone entrance, gates with a keypad, vinyl fences, and overpriced homes stacked like bread loaves on a shelf. It sprang up right next to the western edge of my property, and that's when she entered my life. Karen Lee Forsyth, president of the HOA. Perfect posture, permanently squinting, like everything she looked at had personally offended her. She came stomping down my gravel driveway within a month of moving in. I was collecting eggs, wearing mud-covered boots, and a flannel shirt that probably smelled like chicken shit. "You must be Mr. Grant," she said, smiling the way a snake smiles. I nodded. "And you must be trespassing." She ignored that. Over the next few years, she kept coming back, sometimes with cupcakes, sometimes with threats disguised as community invitations. She wanted me to join the HOA for a symbolic fee, open a walking path through my forest for local families, or, my personal favorite, let the development cut a driveway through my land. For easier river access, the answer was always the same: hell no. And not just verbally. I handed her notarized documents proving my property was never part of their master plan. My land had been independently zoned for over a century. I wasn't subject to their bylaws, their fees, or their fake moral authority. Karen didn't take rejection well. She filed noise complaints about roosters, claimed my bees were attacking pets. They weren't. Even told the fire marshal I was illegally burning waste. It was leaves during permitted burn season. None of it stuck. Eventually, the noise stopped. I hadn't seen her or heard from the HOA in months. I figured she'd moved on to bullying the actual members who couldn't tell her to get bent, but something about that silence didn't sit right. You don't poke at a control freak's kingdom and expect her to walk away. No, that kind of person doesn't go quiet. They plan. So I made some plans too. I wasn't paranoid, but I wasn't naive either. I didn't add cameras to the house. I didn't want to live like I was guarding a vault, but I kept 2 high-res wildlife cams hidden in trees. Not for Karen, for deer, I told myself. Still, when I walked my fence lines, I started noticing small things. Footprints where they shouldn't be. A snapped branch. A trail someone had walked more than once. I chalked it up to neighborhood kids, but the hairs on the back of my neck said otherwise. Then came the offer from my sister to visit Tennessee for a week. Family reunion, first time in 5 years. I almost said no. I didn't like leaving the land untended. But the chickens would be fine. The bees were good for a week, and I'd locked everything down tighter than a Baptist church on Sunday. The morning I left, I stood at the edge of my porch, hands on hips, looking over my forest like a general surveying the front line. Everything looked peaceful. Turns out that was the most dangerous part. When I got back from Tennessee, the first thing I noticed was the smell. I'd pulled up to my gate just after dawn. The gravel crunched under my tires like always, but the moment I opened the truck door, I was hit with a stench, like rotting drywall and sour oil had gotten into a fight, and both lost. My heart dropped into my boots. I drove up slow, every nerve on edge. Rounding the bend to the main clearing near the house, I slammed the brakes. My land, my damn land, looked like a landfill in hell. There were mounds of concrete chunks, rusted-out bathtubs, splintered plywood, coils of rebar, shattered toilets, bags of insulation, soggy mattresses, black garbage bags, dozens of them, torn open and spilling God knows what across the grass. There were barrels, plastic drums with faded labels I didn't recognize, some dented, some cracked. I didn't move for almost a minute, just sat there in my truck with my hand frozen on the gear shift, staring like my brain refused to accept it. Then I opened the door and walked through it like a man stepping into a crime scene, because that's what it was. The grass had been crushed by heavy tires. I could see deep tread marks gouged into the soft earth where the gravel path ended. They didn't come from my truck, and then it clicked. The back trail, the one that runs along the tree line from the HOA's side, the one they wanted to develop into a community trail. It wasn't blocked, never had been. I'd kept it open for deer, and now someone had used it. I didn't touch a thing. I just stood there trying to make sense of the scale. This wasn't one or two idiots with a pickup truck. This was tons, literally. Whoever did this had brought in a commercial-sized load of debris and dumped it like they were in a rush. I marched straight to the house and opened the safe, grabbed the SD cards from the trail cams and slid them into my laptop. It took a minute for the first video to load. When it did, I just leaned back and watched, jaw tightening with every passing second. There it was. Wednesday, 2:34 p.m. A huge white box truck rolls up the back path. No logo, the kind you rent for cash. 3 guys hop out, all wearing matching gray shirts that said Grant's Property Disposal in a fake-looking font. I'd never heard of such a company, and I was Grant. They start unloading like clockwork. Big piles, heavy junk, drums. Cameras catch one of them laughing as he kicks a bag open. Another one makes a comment I can't quite hear. They were done in about 25 minutes. 2 hours later, a Lexus SUV shows up. Out steps Karen Forsyth, HOA royalty in yoga pants and a windbreaker. She's holding her phone high, making a slow, dramatic spin as she films the dump site. Then she says, loud and clear, right into the camera, "This level of negligence is exactly why the county needs to take action. It's unacceptable, absolutely disgusting." And then she smirks. Actually smirks. I watched that clip 5 times. I didn't even notice my hands had clenched into fists until I heard the leather of my office chair groan. Still, I didn't go storming down to her house. Not yet. I knew better. I'd worked corporate security long enough to recognize a setup when I saw one. This wasn't vandalism. This was orchestration. I called the sheriff's office first, asked if anything had been filed against my name recently. The deputy paused, then said yes. A report from River Birch Hollow HOA claiming that I'd illegally dumped construction waste near the watershed zone. Claimed someone from the HOA had witnessed a large truck leaving my property. Claimed the evidence was overwhelming. I asked if I was under investigation. The deputy hesitated again. Well, there's been an initial complaint filed with the county environmental office and a forwarded notice to the DA. You might want to come in and talk to us. Jesus. I hung up, checked my mailbox, and there it was. A thick white envelope from the County Environmental Board. Inside was a formal notification of environmental code violations and an order to appear for a preliminary hearing. The wording was lawyer speak for, "We think you're guilty until you prove otherwise." And the cherry on top, an HOA certified letter demanding I immediately begin remediation or face civil litigation, with damages claimed in excess of $1.6 million for threats to public health, devaluation of community property, and willful environmental sabotage. All because I left town for a week and let a psychopath get bored. I stared out my window at the wreckage. The smell was already seeping in through the walls. I could hear flies buzzing somewhere near the barrels. They wanted a war? They just got one. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, documents, and rage. I didn't sleep that first night. I sat at my desk printing copies of every relevant document I had. Property deeds, maps showing my land's exemption from River Birch Hollow, correspondence with the HOA from years past, even the damn letter from their own legal rep confirming I was not under their jurisdiction. It was all going into a folder thicker than a New York deli sandwich. Next came the footage. I duplicated it on 3 separate USBs, uploaded it to a cloud server, and stashed a copy on an encrypted drive in my safe. I didn't just want this footage. I wanted insurance. Then I called my lawyer. Her name's Margot Salazar. She's about 5'0" of pure steel, and she has a professional allergy to bullshit. She picked up on the second ring. "You sound like someone just stole your chickens." I said, "Karen dumped a construction site on my property, called the cops, and filed $1 million lawsuit." She didn't even pause. "Tell me everything." By the time I was done explaining, she was already sending me a list of county contacts and asking for copies of the footage. She called it a premeditated false flag environmental attack, and I couldn't disagree. That same afternoon, I got a visit. Unmarked SUV, 2 county inspectors, and 1 officer from the Environmental Division. Nice enough guys, but their tone was stiff. Legal stiffness. We received a complaint regarding illegal waste dumping originating from this property, the lead inspector said, handing me a clipboard with the formal notice. I figured, mind if I show you something before we begin? They hesitated but followed me into the house. I sat them down at the kitchen table and hit play on the trail cam footage. All 3 leaned in. 5 minutes later, they weren't leaning anymore. They were frozen. "That's not you," one of them asked. "Do I look like I rent trucks and wear a company shirt with my own last name on it?" They didn't laugh, but the silence said a lot. Karen's voice came through loud and smug on the recording. "Absolutely disgusting." I paused it there. The officer rubbed his forehead. "We'll need to take copies of this footage." "You'll get it," I said. But I want it entered into the official complaint response as exculpatory evidence today, not next week. I know how slow the system gets when it wants to drag its feet. The lead inspector nodded, suddenly a lot more respectful. "Understood." After they left, Margot called back. She had already filed a formal counterclaim and was preparing a motion to dismiss the HOA's civil case entirely. Her voice was sharp. "They're playing dirty," she said, "which means we play smart. You don't talk to the press. You don't talk to the HOA. You let me and the courts do the talking." She also advised me to call a private environmental cleanup crew immediately, not just to remove the waste, but to do an independent analysis of the materials. "Because if those barrels are what I think they are," she added, "they just turned a civil nuisance into a felony charge. Against them, it took some digging, but I found an independent hazmat consultant named Ray, who'd worked with a friend of mine during a soil contamination case in Virginia. I called in a favor. Ray was on site the next morning with gloves, masks, and a small team. He took samples from the barrels, the soil underneath, and the runoff near the creek. I didn't like the look on his face. "Some of these are industrial," he said, holding up one half-collapsed container. "Not farm use." "Definitely not residential. Define industrial," I said. "Municipal waste, possibly septic solvents, construction degreasers. One of these smells like benzene-based solvents. If so, that's hazardous material." "How bad?" "If any of this leaked into the watershed, your neighbors aren't suing you. You're suing the county for failing to act." By day 3, I received 2 more court documents, one summoning me to a preliminary administrative hearing on environmental violations, and the other notifying me of a pending criminal investigation for dumping hazardous waste. Margot called as soon as the news broke. "They're trying to bury you alive," she said. "But they didn't count on you having your own shovel." Her voice had that dangerous calm I remembered from my own days in corporate counterintel. "That I'm going to dissect them with their own tools" tone. We agreed to file an emergency injunction against any HOA action until the criminal investigation concluded, and she submitted our full video evidence and private environmental report directly to the DA's office. Then she said something that stuck with me. "You've already won morally, now we just need to win legally. And when we do, I want everything. Their presidency, their funds, their reputation. We don't settle." And I said, "Damn right we don't." The cleanup crew took 3 days. They hauled out over 6 tons of waste. I watched every load go into their sealed trucks like I was bearing a body that wasn't mine. The worst part wasn't the sight, it was the sound. The dull clatter of metal pipes and broken tile, the slosh of unknown liquids in cracked barrels. It was the sound of being framed. By the time Ray's team finished, my land looked less like a disaster zone and more like a battlefield after the smoke cleared. The soil near the creek was still blackened. Some patches of grass had already yellowed. Ray shook his head when he handed me the interim report. Some of this stuff was old. "Industrial level, no sane person stores this on a farm," I nodded. "And yet here we are." He grunted. "You know what's wild? One of the containers had a partial barcode and a shipping mark. We ran it. Guess who the original client was? A construction firm out of Raleigh used to do contract work for HOAs. Let me guess," I said. "River Birch Hollow." Bingo! I sent that report straight to Margot. She didn't say much, just a low whistle followed by, "This woman is playing chess with clown pieces." The timing couldn't have been better. The day after the last truck left my property, I received formal notice that the district attorney's office was opening a criminal environmental case. against me: felony illegal dumping, environmental damage, potential threat to community safety. They even included a list of HOA board members supporting the complaint, all signed. Karen's name was at the top in big proud letters, like she was authoring the damn Constitution. I sat down with that paper and laughed for a full minute. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't, I was going to throw a chair through the window. Then I called Margot. She didn't laugh. She said, "Good. Let them commit. The deeper they go, the worse it gets for them when we pull the rug." We scheduled a press release, not to talk to media, but to formally submit the complete video archive and environmental reports to the DA's office before the hearing. I didn't want to fight this in headlines. I wanted to kill it in the courtroom. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I started digging. Karen had always rubbed me the wrong way, but now I wanted to know what she was made of, where she came from. I started with public records. Turns out she used to run another HOA in Virginia. That one dissolved in 2019 after multiple lawsuits over misuse of funds and targeted harassment. Then I found a court transcript buried in an online archive. A woman named Lydia Polk had filed a complaint against Karen for defamation and psychological coercion. The HOA in that case had accused Lydia of disruptive gardening. I wish I were joking. The case was settled out of court. Karen resigned a week later and moved to North Carolina. And now here she was, playing the same game, except this time the stakes were higher. And I had receipts. Margot and I prepared a countersuit. It wasn't just a nuisance claim. It was a scorched earth campaign of our own. Criminal conspiracy to commit environmental fraud, trespassing and unlawful dumping, filing false police reports, defamation with intent to damage property value, abuse of HOA authority, attempted extortion. I added something extra: false impersonation of a waste disposal business, since they'd used my last name and a fabricated company name to label the dump site. Margot filed the countersuit in Superior Court. She also sent notice to the HOA board's insurer because once the fraud claim stuck, they were going to be on the hook. And HOA boards hate when the insurer gets involved. Karen, of course, doubled down. She organized a board meeting to inform the community of the ongoing environmental danger I'd caused. Someone sent me a copy of the recording. In it, she actually refers to me as a rogue landowner with a bunker mentality. She also added, "We believe in environmental stewardship and accountability. If he doesn't clean up his act, the law will do it for him." Cute. That night, I walked the edge of my property by the tree line where the back trail had been. I brought a shovel. I dug 2 narrow trenches across the trail entrance and dropped in thick logs lined with rusted scrap metal, then refilled the soil. Not enough to injure anyone, but enough to stop a truck or SUV cold. After that, I installed 2 new motion sensors and posted a sign that read, "Private land. Trespass equals prosecution. We record. We retaliate." Margot would have told me to take it down, but she wasn't there. And Karen was just getting started. So was I. Court day. The first of many, apparently. Margot and I walked into the county courthouse just before 9 a.m., both dressed like we were about to fire someone. She wore charcoal gray. No nonsense. I had on the best I could muster, pressed shirt, old cowboy boots shined for once, and my expression set to try me. Karen was already inside, sitting at the plaintiff's table like the queen of petty grievances. She wore pearls, which made me laugh. She even had a color-coordinated binder with HOA logos printed on the front. Her lawyer, a smug 30-something guy with the energy of an unpaid intern, kept checking his phone. Across the aisle, our table had one thing they didn't: evidence that could nuke a city block. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, called the room to order. This is a preliminary hearing regarding environmental violations and motions to consolidate related civil actions. We will begin with testimony and submitted evidence. Karen's lawyer went first. He delivered a dramatic monologue about community health, illegal dumping, the visual assault my property had become, and how my negligence endangered the collective ecological identity of River Birch Hollow. I wish I were exaggerating. Then came their evidence, photos Karen had taken, printouts of anonymous complaints, a Google Earth image with a red circle drawn around the dump site, and, I shit you not, a slideshow titled "The Decline of Property Values, One Man's Trash." I leaned over to Margot and whispered, "I feel like we're on Judge Judy." She didn't laugh, but her smirk told me everything I needed to know. Our turn. Margot stood and walked through the timeline with surgical precision. trail cam footage, timeline of my absence, vehicle IDs, forensic comparison of tire tracks, chemical analysis of the waste, none of which matched anything I used on my property. Then she played the clip, the one where Karen strolls in, filming the trash and announcing her faux outrage. The courtroom was silent. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Miss Forsythe, is that your voice in this recording?" Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, but I was documenting." "You can address that later. Continue, Ms. Salazar." Then Margot handed over the report showing that some of the waste came from a contractor previously employed by River Birch Hollow HOA for construction work in 2020. "Do you have proof the defendant had any connection to this contractor?" the judge asked. Karen's lawyer tried to object. He called it speculative. That's when Margot pulled out the receipts. Literally, a digital copy of the contractor's invoice from 2020, billed to River Birch Hollow HOA, signed by Karen Forsythe herself. I turned slightly and caught Karen's expression freeze. Just for a second. That kind of moment you only see when a person realizes they've stepped in their own trap. We wrapped up with Ray's report, the barrels marked with trace benzene, the soil samples, the risk to the watershed. The judge didn't say much, just made notes, asked a few follow-up questions, and set a date for a formal evidentiary hearing. Outside the courtroom, Karen blew past me like I was a lamppost. Her lawyer trailed behind her, not looking nearly as smug anymore. Margot lit a cigarette the second we hit the sidewalk. She doesn't even smoke. It was purely symbolic. "That went better than expected," she said. I nodded. "So what's next?" "Now we wait and prep for round 2. But round 2 came quicker than we thought. The next morning, Margot got a call from a county prosecutor. Apparently, they'd received our filings, reviewed the video evidence, and decided it warranted opening a criminal investigation into false reporting and environmental fraud. Karen wasn't just in civil trouble anymore. She was walking toward felony territory. It gets better. The waste disposal contractor, Grant's Property Disposal, the fake company, was a small-time outfit based an hour away. Once confronted with the evidence, the owner folded like a cheap card table, said he was hired under the table by an HOA board representative to dump the waste and make it look organic to the land. They showed him the footage. The guy cracked, signed a sworn statement, even handed over his phone. And what did they find on that phone? A text from Karen, 2 weeks old. "Make sure it looks like he's been doing this all summer. Scatter the bags. Leave the barrels exposed." That was the moment the case stopped being funny. That was when it got real. You ever watch someone realize they're not the hunter anymore? That flicker behind the eyes, the moment the predator understands its prey. I saw that on Karen's face, sitting across the courtroom at the evidentiary hearing. By then, the county had filed preliminary charges against her for false reporting, and the contractor had turned into a singing canary. He handed over everything. Texts, timestamps, even a voicemail where Karen told him to make it look disgusting. It was damning. Margot said we were walking into court holding a loaded nuke, but the woman didn't flinch. She still walked in with her hair perfect, her lipstick smug, and a Starbucks cup like she was heading to a PTA meeting. The prosecution opened with a bang, subpoenaed communications, footage, expert analysis of the chemical waste, and a timeline that ripped the HOA's version of events to shreds. The judge, God bless her, had the patience of a saint, but the face of someone who'd seen enough nonsense in her lifetime. Then came the expert witness. The county had hired an independent environmental chemist to testify on the nature of the waste. His original report confirmed the substances were industrial grade, not linked to agricultural or residential use. Case closed, right? Except when he took the stand, he started dancing. "Well, Your Honor," he said, flipping through his revised statement, "it is technically possible that some of the materials found could result from improper agricultural storage or outdated farm chemicals." Margot stiffened beside me. "What the hell?" I whispered. He continued, hedging his words, downgrading the level of toxicity, questioning the chain of custody. It wasn't outright denial, but it was enough to create doubt. Manufactured, obvious doubt. When cross-examination came, Margot asked him flat out, "Did you change your report voluntarily, or were you contacted by anyone affiliated with the HOA?" He smiled. "I have nothing to hide," he said. That's when I texted Kay. Pull the ripcord. Now Kay is Chris O'Connor, hacker, former corporate infosec. one of the only people I trust to poke holes in the internet without leaving fingerprints. He owed me big time from a thing we don't talk about. And now he was returning the favor. 3 days earlier, after reviewing the chemist's name on the court filings, I gave Chris a heads up. If anything smells like bribe money, I want it on my desk before court. Chris had done what Chris does best. Quietly, legally-ish. He started with open-source databases, bounced through some employee tax records, then hit gold. The expert's corporate consulting LLC, dormant for 2 years until last week. Deposits showed up from a Delaware-based holding company, $12,000, labeled as consulting honorarium. The source of funds, a real estate legal fund registered to an HOA services company, one that had done business with River Birch Hollow. Chris even grabbed encrypted backups from the guy's Google Drive, where he found a PDF, a script titled Revised Talking Points, Environmental Ambiguity. We entered all of it into evidence within the hour. Back in court, Margot stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "we request an emergency motion to challenge the integrity of the expert witness's testimony based on newly uncovered financial influence and prepared falsified material." The judge tilted her head. "On what basis?" Margot turned to the projector. Click. On the screen, a PDF title page. Revised Talking Points, Environmental Ambiguity. Time-stamped. Sourced. Click. A redacted payment receipt from the Delaware LLC, $12,000. Click. Metadata showing the source IP address used to upload the document traced to the expert's home network. Dead. Silence. The expert sat back in the witness chair like someone had unplugged his spine. Karen shifted in her seat, but I could see her lips go pale. The judge asked the witness, "Sir, did you accept payment to alter your professional assessment in this case?" He didn't answer. His lawyer leaned in and asked for a recess. It was granted. Barely. Outside in the hallway, Karen exploded. Not loudly. She wasn't that stupid, but her eyes were wild, her mouth curled in rage. I could read lips well enough to catch, "You told me it was safe," before she disappeared down the corridor. Margot and I didn't say anything until we were back in the car. "That was a kill shot," I said. "Not yet," she replied. "But it's coming." That night, the judge issued an order disqualifying the expert, referring him to the state licensing board, and reopening evidence review with prejudice against the plaintiffs. The prosecution submitted a motion to expand criminal charges to include obstruction of justice and tampering with expert testimony. Karen's attorney quit the next morning, and still, she didn't back down. Which, to be honest, made this even more fun. I didn't go to the next hearing expecting fireworks. I expected paperwork, procedural motions, maybe a few tight-lipped lawyers trying to downplay a bribery scandal. What I didn't expect was a full-blown collapse in real time. Courtroom was packed. Journalists in the back rows, HOA members whispering in the hall, even a local blogger live streaming under his hoodie. The story had spread fast. HOA Queen Frame's neighbor gets caught bribing expert. No matter how much Karen tried to spin it, the stink had already soaked through the walls. She showed up alone. No lawyer, no binder, no pearls. Just her, looking like she'd aged a decade in a week. Her makeup was thinner, her hair pulled back like she couldn't be bothered. She sat down slowly, without that usual stiff elegance, and stared straight ahead. The judge opened with a statement I'll never forget. Before we begin, the court has received supplemental filings from the district attorney's office, including sworn testimony, digital evidence, and financial records substantiating multiple new allegations against the plaintiff, Karen Forsyth. These include false reporting, fabrication of evidence, environmental sabotage, conspiracy to commit fraud, and witness tampering dead silence. Karen didn't flinch, but she also didn't speak. The judge continued, "Ms. Forsyth, you are not currently under arrest, but the DA has filed a motion for a grand jury indictment and has recommended bail conditions. You are advised to retain new counsel immediately." Then came the second blow. The prosecution submitted 2 surprise witness statements from former HOA board members. Apparently, not everyone in River Birch Hollow was thrilled about being dragged into felony territory. The first statement came from the HOA treasurer. He admitted that Karen had requisitioned discretionary funds under the guise of community improvement studies, money later traced to the shell company that paid the expert witness. The second was from the secretary, who detailed how Karen had pressured the board to support the lawsuit, threatening to drag their names down too if they didn't sign off on official letters to the county. And then came the cherry on top. The prosecution played a voicemail left on the waste contractor's phone, a call Karen thought she'd deleted. In it, her voice is unmistakable. It's already set up. The truck comes in on Wednesday, dumps it all near the creek. Make sure to get the logo on the barrels. He'll never dig himself out of this. The board will sign whatever I tell them to. My jaw clenched so hard my molars hurt. The judge called a recess. Half the room stood up like they'd witnessed a car crash. Karen sat frozen. Outside, I leaned against the courthouse wall as Margot lit another of her ceremonial cigarettes. Her face was calm, almost serene. "She's finished," I said. Margot blew smoke. "Legally? Almost. Morally? That voicemail's a public execution." She wasn't wrong. Within 24 hours, the DA's office issued a formal indictment with 11 counts. A judge approved a no-contact order between Karen and every HOA board member, the contractor, and me. The HOA's insurance provider filed a fraud exclusion clause, triggering a full audit of their books. And finally, the state licensing board suspended the expert witness indefinitely pending full investigation. That night, a neighbor, Lisa Tran, whom I'd barely spoken to in 3 years, knocked on my door with a bottle of bourbon and a simple sentence: "I never liked her." We drank on my porch while the tree frogs buzzed in the distance, and, for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Not because it was over, but because she had finally stopped pretending to win. Sentencing day didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like cleaning up after a hurricane. The courtroom was quiet, not tense, just quiet in that hollow, exhausted way. The kind of silence that follows when the worst is over, but the damage still lingers. I sat in the same spot I'd been for months now. Same boots, same stare. Only this time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a man who survived the damn forest fire. Karen sat at the defense table, flanked by a court-appointed attorney she barely acknowledged. She looked small, hollow. Her hair was pulled back tight, her clothes a shade darker than usual, and the arrogance that used to leak out of her like motor oil was gone. The judge didn't draw it out. 12 felony counts, 3 for environmental sabotage, 2 for criminal conspiracy, 4 for falsifying reports and evidence, 1 for bribing a state-certified expert, and 2 for attempting to frame a private citizen for a crime she engineered. The sentence, 12 years, with a minimum of 8 before parole. She didn't cry, didn't protest, didn't even blink. She just sat there as if someone had finally unplugged the puppet strings. Her posture slackened as the judge read off the conditions: fines, community restitution, and a permanent ban from holding any position in any HOA for the rest of her natural life. Then came the fallout. The 2 HOA-aligned officers who helped delay reports and ignore my initial complaints, both indicted. Internal Affairs opened cases before I even left the courthouse. One already pled guilty to falsifying a report and got 6 years. The other tried to fight it, but with body cam footage missing and time logs falsified, he went down to 5 years, suspended sentence with probation. The HOA itself? Toast. A civil ruling declared the entire organization dissolved due to systemic fraud, misuse of funds, and unlawful targeting of a non-member property owner. Their remaining funds, roughly $430,000, were put into escrow to pay restitution to me and other impacted residents. And me? I got $850,000 in damages, emotional distress, property damage, legal fees, lost work time, and punitive damages for the attempted framing. Not a penny from Karen personally, she was broke, but the insurance payouts from the dissolved HOA did the trick. I didn't blow the money. I used it for 3 things. First, to restore the land, I hired a full environmental recovery team, replanted trees, repaired the creek bed, and paid for regular water testing for the next 3 years. Second, I built a 12-foot steel perimeter fence around the vulnerable side of my land, complete with motion lights, thermal cameras, and a redundant power system. Overkill? Maybe. But after what happened, paranoia felt a lot like wisdom. And third, I bought a domain, landownersagainsthodarani.com. Call it petty. Call it overkill. I call it a public service. I started uploading every document from the case, every filing, redacted for safety but brutally honest. Videos, court records, templates for legal pushback against abusive HOAs. And soon enough, emails started rolling in. Hundreds, then thousands. Some were from landowners like me. some from current HOA members stuck in nightmare situations. A few were from lawyers asking to collaborate. I even got a message from Lydia Polk, the woman Karen had harassed in Virginia. She said, "I wish I'd fought back like you did." But my favorite message came 2 months later. An anonymous tip. Karen is being transferred to general population next week. Rumor is her new nickname is HOA. I laughed until I cried. Now I don't expect peace to last forever. There's always someone out there who wants to build fences around freedom and call it order. But the next time someone knocks on my door with a smile and a clipboard, I'll be ready. And this time, the cameras won't be for the deer.